Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. I'd like to welcome all the viewers for this discussion on a very important topic of reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day. Today we're very fortunate. We have with us a personality, a disciple of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. He's an initiating spiritual master. He's a scholar. He's a scholar who has taught Srila Prabhupada's books for decades. He is the torchbearer, an educator in various parts of the world, especially in the Americas. And in many ways, I can say that he's the father of many scholars, as we say in some languages. And like to welcome with a big thank you, His Holiness Hanumatpresaka Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. It's an honor to be here. Very exciting. We are in Nashville, California, and it's still very dark outside. And we're happy to answer whatever questions you have and whatever we can contribute. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Maharaj, we would like to know from you, when did you first encounter Srila Prabhupada's books and under what circumstances?
The first thing we got was a Back to Godhead magazine. And we were in San Francisco, walking along with our wife. And some devotees were chanting by the side of the street. And other devotee approached us, and I gave 25 cents and got a Back to Godhead magazine. And it was very, very impressive. The picture in the back was the picture of Srila Prabhupada, surrounded by nothing but flowers, And her first impression was he was kind of like some kind of a mafia guy of the spiritual world, spiritual mafioso, What is this guy? So then we started reading it, and it was immediately so impressive that we kept reading the articles again and again, Then later, I was at the University of California, the Davis campus, which is the agricultural campus, everything else. And devotees were distributing books there during the Whole Earth Festival. It actually started there. And I think it was Buddhimanta. So he was preaching to me like the Dickens, take this book, take this book. He was dressed like a brahmachari. And he wanted $10, which I guess now would be like $50. $50 for it was a big Krishna book, and a big solid one, like that.
Yes,
big type, everything. Yeah, one of two volumes. So I was practicing yoga then, and part of the yoga process was to blank my mind. Okay, so I was blanking my mind while he was preaching to me. And then my wife was glaring at me. Okay, you're going to waste more of our money on these your stupid things, And so I really had to make this choice. Because I knew if I bought the book, when I went off with her, she would give me all kinds of problems and harassment. And so it was kind of like Maya. Maya was sitting there on one side glaring at me. I'll make you suffer if you surrender to Krishna. And so finally I had to make this choice. And if I made this choice, no, this is right, I got to do it, So I bought the book. So I got I got the Krishna book, volume 2. And it still is, I might say the most central book to me in all of Prabhupada's books.
Maharaj, do you remember anything from your first reading of the Back to Godhead magazine? Any article, any words of Srila Prabhupada which struck your consciousness and your heart and inspired you?
Nothing specific in the magazine. Everything was very nice. I can't remember anything. I think at the time I was very impressed by different topics that were being taken up. Oh, okay, that's a very, very nice discussion of that topic. That's a very, very nice discussion of that topic, And so in that way, yeah, I was impressed by the different themes that were being dealt with, but I can't remember specifically anything now. But it was an experience of just being elevated out of the material world into a world of intelligence, clear intelligence.
Maharaj, what was the gap between the first Back to Godhead magazine and then when you received the second volume of Krishna book? How many months or years apart was these two experiences?
Probably maybe just a few months, maybe like 3 months, or maybe 3 months, 4 months. Yeah.
And in the second volume of Krishna book, Maharaj, you just described it. You felt this is a central piece of Prabhupada's writing in your life. So possibly as you analyze the central piece of his writing, is there something that you like to share with us from that central piece that again inspired you?
I'll tell you one experience. I got the book, and I opened it up and I was reading it, and it said, once upon a time there was a king of the name Satrajit who lived within the jurisdiction of Dwarkadam. And it goes on like that. I still remember that. Very impressive, Then it said something about this incident took place after the birth of Pradyumna described in the previous chapters. Okay, so I had this book, and that was the first chapter. And I couldn't figure this out. Well, where's the previous chapter? So I went back and I tried to look and see if there was some page that kind of stuck together. Then I was actually looking to see if the lining of the book had been kind of glued by accident. That was really weird. Then I finally look at the very bottom of the back on the spine and it just said Volume 2. Then I realized this devotee had sold me Volume 2 of the book. That was the first thing. So okay, so it was, I guess that reinforces the idea that Prabhupada said, my books are just like a tree made of sugar. Wherever you taste them, they're sweet. So I think I would say a fundamental principle. It doesn't have to be a highly big organized program of study. Just open one of Prabhupada's books and stick your nose in and don't take it out. So that was one of the first impressions. And maybe also because maybe I am more on this level of Aishwarya, Baba, and so Krishna in Dwarka is very appropriate for me, I think, in terms of my spiritual development. Another thing was very, very important was that I had read, before that I was going through a whole history of reading. When I was a child, I was forced to read in school. It was boring. Then I discovered juvenile literature, books written for children to entertain them, cowboy stories and adventure stories. And wow, it was a whole different world. And wow, you can read books and actually enjoy them, Then I discovered our library. I mean, we had a very, very big library in Arcadia, California. So there was one whole bookcase, which was just science fiction books. And then I discovered that, and that again was a whole another level. That was going to the level of, mysticism and all these kind of things, and very, very, broad perspectives. Clifford Simek was one of those people, and he just was thinking very much out of the paradigm of the modern materialistic world, mechanistic world. So it was an introduction to jnana and mysticism. And so I read a lot of science fiction, all this fantastic things happening and all these incredible things, So when I was reading the Krishna book, Prabhupada was describing how Jarasandha attacked Mathura with 50 million soldiers, and Krishna came out and was chopping off hands and arms and heads, and blood was flowing, and the elephants looked like little islands, and the tortoises looked like heads of, it was, and then anybody who reads this story will never have any problem with tooth decay, or will fly through the air, and and it was just incredible, But on the other hand, Prabhupada was presenting it all as fact, and along with the presentation of the fantastic Leela, he was inserting continuously very rational explanation. And I saw that every philosophy I come across, it was being explained. And this monotheism, service to God, was being presented very rationally, very logically. I'd already gone through quantum mechanics at Berkeley and everything else. I'd done surgery on dogs, biology. So here was a logical, scientific, rational presentation, which I never found anyplace else, and was completely clear. Okay. So at some point,
and perhaps also the representation of a transcendental superhero, much better than any science fiction movie.
That's the next point I was going to make. I think in the same way. So the first thing was that it was completely rational and everything else, and everything like it. The second point, I was reading the book, had it on my lap, and suddenly my mind said, this has got to be the biggest lie you ever read, or it is the absolute truth, or it's the absolute truth. Then my intelligence said to my mind, whether it's an absolute lie or the absolute truth, in either case, it's absolute. And so I was shocked. No, I was shocked because I suddenly realized that's the absolute truth. There's no evidence to support it. I realized that what I was holding in my hand was not a part of the material world. I was still very dull-headed, but I just realized at this point, this book was not an ordinary book. So that's one impression.
And perhaps it was absolute, because when else do you ever find those two fellows agreeing with each other? The mind and the intelligence coming to a same conclusion. There must be truth behind it for it to be. So.
Yep. And that one
Maharaj, I want to ask you some facts. One fact I wanted to ask you was on the second book of Krishna book, second volume. This is about Shatrujit. I was being asked recently that who was it that died in the forest? Was it the uncle of Satyabhama, or was it the brother of Satyabhama?
Satyabhama or
Satyabhama's uncle or brother? Which one was it that who was killed in the forest?
No, it was Satyajit's brother, not Satyabhama.
So the uncle. So Satyabhama's uncle.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Oof. Yeah. I guess what's his name? Prashna? Something.
Yes.
Prashna.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was Satyabhama's brother. Yeah, it was her
father's brother.
Yeah, because she was a gift from the sun god. Yeah, it says like that. Okay, yeah, it's complicated here. Okay, she was a gift from the sun god, so she was the daughter of Satyajit. They went in some way. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it was her uncle. Yeah.
The reason I asked this, Maharaj, because in the Bhagavatam, on this verse, in the translation, Srila Prabhupada says that it is written as the brother of Satyabhama. So it's sort of, my daughters were asking me, they were like, what is it? Can you offer an explanation? I said, I can't offer an explanation. I must ask somebody who knows. Now, it happened yesterday. Now, today you talked about the pastime. I said, I should ask Maharaj.
Yeah. The sun god, I'm reading, the sun god gave Satyajit two jewels. One was a Shamtaka jewel, and the other was Satyabhama. So in some ways, he is the father, of Satyabhama, the sun god. So it might be in that sense that, it's the brother.
I'll definitely offer this jewel of information to my children and cherish it in my heart. Maharaj, on the topic of jewel of information, you were highlighting that how all that you read presented as facts was revolutionary. Maharaj, after having come to this conclusion, what was the next step in your journey of reading Prabhupada's books that you took?
It wasn't. It's actually almost the exact opposite. That the facts about Krishna Lila were revolutionary. Not revolutionary, new, but what I was presenting in terms of logic and rational information and that kind of stuff, that was actually something I already knew, but it wasn't very bright, And so what Prabhupada was presenting was something I already knew. Yeah, I know that. That's right, And so, but it was making it in a very clear, concise, precise sense. I knew as a Christian that God was, the most powerful, all powerful, but now Prabhupada was presenting it in a totally scientific fashion. So that was the only book I had. I was reading in a very, very scrupulous sense and bothering all my friends and associates and family members, maybe becoming so absorbed. Then finally I decided I had to visit the temple, and somewhere there was a list. I think I got a Maha Mantra card also from some devotees who were chanting. So I went to the temple in San Francisco, got there about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I knocked on the door and somebody came to the door and said, "We're closed, go away, come back at 4:30. Okay, so I went back out and sat in my car across the street. And I was wondering, my goodness, what's going on? So I opened my Krishna book, and the first thing I read was, Prabhupada said, if one experiences obstacles in his spiritual life, he should not give up. He should be determined and continue. Okay. So I experienced that. Then at 4:30, I went back over, knocked on the door. And then one brahmachari received me nicely, and he preached to me, took the time. Then he presented me several books, as brahmacharis do, devotees do. And I bought them all. And he was, I didn't know, but he was smiling like anything. He bought a big Bhagavad Gita. I think maybe I also got a teaching of the Lord Chaitanya from him, So then that was my next step. And the Bhagavad Gita for me was very difficult, very boring at that time. It was too dry for me. But I was going on reading it, So that was my next step. I got the Bhagavad Gita, and I think it was teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
Maharaj, what year was this when all of this transpired? Your attraction towards Prabhupada's books?
Probably 1973. Yeah.
Maharaj, in terms of your interaction with devotees in those years and the enthusiasm to distribute books and read books, can you share something from us from those years as to what was the disposition and attitude that devotees had towards Srila Prabhupada's books?
Of course, it depends on which devotees you're talking about. There's a big variety in different kinds of devotees and their attractions. Generally speaking, what one time Prabhupada said, there's a San Francisco temple, which is one temple, a certain temple, and it was much smaller than the Los Angeles temple. Los Angeles was very big, powerful. Prabhupada was staying there. Sri Dayananda Maharaj said all the ideas are generated up in Berkeley, in San Francisco, and they go down to Los Angeles and get distributed all over the world, like the tail of a dog. So there was a kind of more creative, introspective attitude and perspective up in San Francisco, and it was more mass production in Los Angeles, So, but in general, there wasn't much taste in reading Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada says, don't come to these classes just as a formality, but come to learn something. And so most of us were going as a formality. If you don't go to the class and you can't stay in the temple, most of the devotees are living in the temple. So to a large degree, there was this formality, of going to the classes. And for me, it was very difficult because I have a very intellectual type perspective. I'm very much a jnani in many ways. So very difficult, And some classes, Jayananda was giving classes, and his classes were much more personal, in the sense of he would quote some verses sometimes, but it was very, very practical, just discussing the philosophy, reading a little bit, And so that was kind of the attitude. There wasn't much attitude towards reading. Jayananda, he would go out in the morning to the produce lot during Mangal Artik, gigantic place in San Francisco, take devotees with him, and he'd come back and he would put the boga he got donated free and everything away, and he would grab me, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning in my little treasury room. I was a treasurer. Say, hey, Hanuman, let's do a reading, So we sit down together and we would read. And that was a very spontaneous experience with Jayananda. We'd read it and talk about it. Other than that, myself, I would just read every now and again just to confirm in my mind that there was something transcendental here. There was something, which was beyond all the chaos and the passion of just getting the results. A lot of book distribution was done out of fear, fear of God, fear of the temple president, competition. Yeah. And people, so some of the book distributors, many times they some of them were reading. Some of them didn't last. Again, they would do it for some motive. Other ones were developing reading and just hearing and chanting like that. But in many cases, the content was way beyond us. We hadn't understood many things, many terms, and so it was just going over our heads. And also at that time, what Prabhupada would do is he would print, maybe 10,000 copies of one volume of the Bhagavatam. Then they would distribute maybe half of those on Sankirtan to get the money to print the next 10,000. So devotees were out there distributing, the 5th canto, volume 2, the karmis about all the hells and, Kumbhipaka, Suchimukha, these karmis on the streets and stuff. And we were trying to understand this, So it was there was no systematic program. Bhagavatam in the morning, Bhagavad Gita in the evening, and that was it. You know, it was kind of like this survival.
Maharaj, in the 1974, one of the devotees, Prabhupada's disciple we interviewed, he was mentioning recently that how around that time, 74, Srila Prabhupada himself started insisting upon his disciples to read. And we were told that amongst the Sankirtan devotees, book distributors, there was a sort of a impetus that everybody should actually read, to the extent that in some temples they said one day of the week the book distributors should just sit and read. From between 1973 and 77 until Srila Prabhupada's disciple, did you see any evolution in the reading habits and then corresponding the consciousness around you of the devotees who are absorbed in reading? Something that you could share with us, Maharaj, on that.
Pretty much no. Now again, this is San Francisco, you know, Berkeley, which is kind of strange, you know. But mostly it was in the mode of passion. Get the books out, get the books out, get the books out, you know. At one point, the Berkeley Temple, like 1978 or something, was collecting $1 million a year from book distribution. It was based upon some pretty bizarre things, some illicit activities, you know. But they were just collecting $1 million in literature, which now would probably be at least $6 million a year, you know, at least. And 1/3 was going to buy books and distribute. So the focus was how many books are getting out, and classes were neglected. There were almost no evening classes, you know, and individual reading was just not being carried on at all. There was not much transparency when Prabhupada was here with the San Francisco Temple with his letters. So if he was sending letters and these kind of things about reading and that kind of stuff, you know, then it wasn't getting out, you know. One thing about the Sankirtan and the book distribution, point two is that one time there was a big push that everybody, when somebody asked Prabhupada, the devotees are going out and selling books, but they want to read more every day. They want to read 2-3 hours a day or something like that. And Prabhupada said, no, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening is sufficient, you know. And then they can distribute the books, you know, distribute the knowledge they're getting. He said they should think of themselves like great generous people, that because they themselves want to enjoy these things, enjoy these books, but they're sacrificing their own enjoyment of my books to share them with others like that. So it's a point of putting the reading in proportion, a certain amount of japa, a certain amount of puja, a certain amount of kirtan, a certain amount of reading and discussion, and then putting it all in proportion so it was a balanced diet. Because, of course, without chanting Hare Krishna, then it becomes very difficult, if it's not impossible, you know, to really understand the literature like that and so on. So that's one thing I think is very important, is that proportion has to be there in reading Prabhupada's books. And of course, he also said that, you know, an intelligent man won't be satisfied without at least 1 hour of personal time to read. So in that case, Prabhupada was saying morning and evening classes, and your brahmanas, intelligent class, yeah, they have to have this time to sit alone and read like that. So it's different for different people, you know. Yeah.
So you very nicely described the balanced meal that all of us need to have. Maharaj, then subsequently in the following years, now it's been 45 years plus since you're engaging with the movement and reading Prabhupada's books. Can you please share with us your own personal journey in terms of absorbing yourself in Srila Prabhupada's transcendental purports from 1977 onwards up till now? And how did that personally help you in your spiritual life?
When Prabhupada was in San Francisco, in Berkeley in 1975, you know,
yes,
I two things, you know, I've always remembered. I heard from my spiritual master's lips, and now you can hear from my lips. Okay, I heard this from others, and he heard it from Prabhupada's lips. Prabhupada said, anybody who chants Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Gadadhar, Srivas, Hari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. and follows it with Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, has achieved the perfection of life. But if you want to preach, you should probably read my books. So that's been, I would say, very, 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 very central dictum in my life, you know. And you know, that kind of perspective, I've always been more inclined. I think it's such a fact too that the first thing is chanting. Hansadutta said one time he was traveling with Prabhupada. I think he was driving and Prabhupada was in the car, and Prabhupada asked him. I heard this from Hansadutta's lips. That Prabhupada asked him, "Why do you think I wrote these books?" And Hansadutta said, "Well, you know, it's because it's such a good philosophy, Prabhupada, this and that, you know." And Hansadutta said, "No," and Prabhupada said, "No, I wrote these books to convince you to chant Hare Krishna. If you're convinced to chant Hare Krishna, you don't have to read these books." You know. And then Hansadutta said at that point he realized he was not convinced to chant Hare Krishna. I heard from Jayananda's lips. We were out in the Rath Yatra construction area, and he said, Prabhupada said, if you just go on chanting Hare Krishna, you'll see pastimes you never read in any of my books. Like that. So there's a totally integrated reality between chanting, kirtan, japa, and swadhyay, you know, studying, reading the books like that. You know, the books are, of course, a kind of kirtan. So that's our perspective realization from the very beginning. The second thing Prabhupada said in San Francisco, I heard from his lips, one reporter asked Prabhupada, Swamiji, what will happen to your movement when you die? You know, and Prabhupada responded very strongly. He said, I will never die. I will live forever in my books. And I say there's tangible, my experience, other people, there's tangible experience of that. That if you want to accept them, to study them, to listen to them, to apply them, then the Prabhupada is right there. He's directly there in his movement. It's completely transparent media. Yeah.
Well, we've heard this statement before about Srila Prabhupada lives forever through his books. We've heard this quote, and we've also hearing regularly that how Srila Prabhupada is our founder Acharya, and the third phrase, Srila Prabhupada is a preeminent Siksha Guru. How do these statements become true, and how does one approach to be able to see Prabhupada's presence in his writings?
One time, Sats Rupamar said he asked Prabhupada, "How can I chant better rounds?" And then Prabhupada looked at him very, very strongly and said, "By chanting better rounds." Yeah, so that there's no substitute for bhakti. It's all kind of a little bit of mercy. We'll give you this process. We'll give you that. But in the end, there's no substitute for bhakti. There's no substitute for shraddha. There's no substitute for faith. There's no substitute, whatever you want to call it. You know, there's no substitute for love. And so, as you say, how's it go? Yaya tam mam prapajante tam stadaiva bhajami aham. And so, however we approach Prabhupada's books, you know, that's how we'll realize him as a person. You know, if we approach them looking for something we can take out of them to use to blaspheme Prabhupada and his movement, which people do. They read Prabhupada with this purpose of finding stuff they can use, you know, to destroy our movement, you know, or pervert it. Then they'll see Prabhupada in a certain way, you know. Yeah. So if the gopis are reading Prabhupada's Krishna book in Goloka, or Uddhava was reading the Krishna books in Goloka, you know, why not? You know, take your Krishna book back to Goloka with you. Yeah.
That's such a powerful perspective you've given us, that depending upon how we approach the books, that's what we will get out of it, much like how we approach Krishna. And we hear from Prabhupada and we hear from devotees like yourself that there is no difference between these books, Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna himself, at least in Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj, in order to develop this Shraddha, and you said that we should have this Shraddha, let me ask you the other way around. What are the things that we should not do? What are the things that we should avoid to ensure that our consciousness, our vision does not get colored with the wrong things?
I would go on with the positive. Nasta Preshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamoshloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistake. And there it is. The Shraddha, we can, the devotees by their mercy, Srila Prabhupada by their mercy, Jayananda by his mercy with Ratha Yatra, would engage people in karma yoga. Karma yoga. Oh, I can paint. Paint this Ratha Yatra card. Oh, I can saw this thing. Oh, I can cook. Oh, I can clean. Oh, I can pull the cart. So Jayananda would just engage people. He would tell stories, from the Krishna book and other things about Prabhupada and it wasn't always accurate. It was pretty accurate. It was close enough, But many times he would make mistakes in the accuracy, but the enthusiasm and the way he would tell the stories would just have people like with their hair standing on end, their eyes bulging from their sockets, and the blood running cold in their veins, So they like to hear stories. So somehow or other, if we accept this invitation from the devotees to engage in karma yoga with our hands, our minds, our bodies, our Kshatriya nature, our Shudra nature, then from that we develop a taste. So that's the way to get the taste. If you don't have a taste for reading, you just read as much as you can read, then do whatever you can do for Krishna. The Prabhupada says, not dog hard, nicely. Yeah. And then as much as you can, the Prabhupada says, engage in hearing and chanting. So if you can't, so that's why by sevata, you get an attachment like that and stuff. Yeah.
Definitely, Maharaj. And you had the taste for reading from right at the outset. Maharaj, I want to ask you, this attachment and this nice attachment that you had towards Srila Prabhupada's books and reading, can you please share with us how that evolved into educational programs that you then took up in the subsequent decades? How did they transition? How did you develop these educational programs, and what has happened over the years with these educational programs?
The basic educational program of Lord Chaitanya, as far as I understand, and Srila Prabhupada, is Yare Deke, Tari Kaha, Krishna Upadesh, Amar Agnai Guru Hoin, Tare Desh. Wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna as he is manifest in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna book, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and different literature. Even the devotees, they take those things, they put them in the practical language, modern perspective. So that's our basic thing, is that, just wandering here and there and going on with your life, whatever your nature is, and whoever you meet, connected to Krishna. This is a really good bottled water I have. Oh, and then the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that he's the taste of water. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's like the first educational program. Not forget it. There's always wherever you go and that kind of stuff. Okay. My nature is academic. Yeah, my nature is along those lines since I was a child. Somebody else is a good cook. Some of the most powerful Bhaktivedanta Institute preachers were the cooks. That was specifically Prabhupada's instruction. So first you get them through the cooking, and then you discuss philosophy. Nice reception, nice food, then you discuss philosophy. Yeah. But I had this nature, so I wasn't satisfied. I was reading the books and I wasn't seeing any kind of logical structure. I had my German background, my ancestry, and scientific training. So what happened was that then I started to go through the first 2 cantos, I think, and I started to analyze them. And that's when I realized that they were very systematic. You're going to analyze them. And then I started seeing in Prabhupada's purports, he says, we may note with profit that this has been discussed, that has been discussed. Oh, yeah. So then I started to develop my own thing of analyzing the books, organizing the content, which is one way to approach them. It's a good way. It's an analytical way of it. Analysis and logical understanding is the first level of Shmaranam. Now I understand. This is connected to that. This means the same as that. This is, okay. It's okay. That's the first level of Shmaranam, where we can actually put it all together and kind of grab it. But it's German. It's mechanical. So. And then from that, of course, that led me then to, I was very good at giving classes. I discovered after some time, I started having regular classes in the evening and people would come, started giving certificates. So eventually this evolved into the diplomas and starting to give diplomas on the first two cantos. And somehow or other, I don't know where, I guess I got involved with the Radhadesh program. People were giving seminars in Vrindavan, and I think that was the main thing. In Vrindavan, people were doing seminars, and that's where first systematic education started to come out in my life in San Francisco. Yeah.
Which year was this, Maharaj, if you don't mind asking?
Okay, my point, Vrindavan Institute. The first time I went to India was 1977, 78, I guess it was. Yeah. So in 78 was the first experience I had, I think, of this whole, systematic study and making that the real part of life through the Vrindavan Institute. I think it was then. Yeah. And so I tried doing that, and then of course I got involved with Radhadesh, and I was teaching the Nectar of Devotion there and the university perspective. And I started bringing in outside resources, which fit in very well. David Haberman and his translation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, theater perspective from the whole tradition of theater. Because what we're doing is actually Gandharva Veda, singing, dancing, and drama. That's the whole thing, And so the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is based upon drama, large theory of Bharata Muni. All the terminology is his terminology from before Christ. So then that's what, for me, it started expanding like that. And then now we're going into Carl Jung. And of course, then it's taking Prabhupada. You have to know Prabhupada's books systematically. You have to know the philosophy of nature from Lord Brahma, from Maitreya to Vidura, from Kapila to Devahuti. You see it from different perspectives. You start to take heart. You understand what the books are saying. Why different philosophers are describing it differently. The student-teacher relationship. This is what's all there. The mode of Sankirtan that Prabhupada preaches in the preface is in the schools and universities. The very, very first mode of Sankirtan he preaches in the preface is these things should be taught in the schools and universities. So it's not really a back burner secondary thing. Read with the purpose of teaching. I would say if you don't have that attitude, it's very weak. It's some jnana thing, it's some prestige thing. If you start with the attitude, I'm reading this thing and discussing it with devotees, Sangat Sanjayate Kama, we'll read and study if we have a nice Sangha. By ourselves, it won't have so much potency. Associate with a teacher, associate with classmates, associate with students. Learn how to do all three of those things. And then first thing is association. The second thing is developing some process. And of course, the process Prabhupada gave us was every day in the morning, Bhagavatam class. So we do that online, right? Every day at 7:30 to, I'll go right on. Every day we have our own program online. We have about 45 people, and we're developing kind of systematically according to our association. What kind of people are there? What are their interests? Every Tuesday is the ladies' day for organizing classes. Why not 5 days a week? Okay, all right. Okay, 5 days a week. The ladies can organize classes. But at least right now, the way we're doing it in the Anjana Sudha Academy is Tuesday is Ladies' Day. I'm supposed to organize Monday and Tuesday, Monday and Wednesday. Srinivasacharya, one disciple, very erudite, is organizing Friday. Saturday, we're focusing on the first two cantos, Pada Padma. And we would like to develop a very, very nice study program, which is available for all of our temples, that every Saturday morning, there's a very systematic program where the first two cantos, you go through the first two cantos, 2-12. One should not dare to recite beyond the first two cantos as long as one is still engaged in gross illicit sex. Okay, so every Saturday morning, people can come. They can hear the first two cantos, and it's not offensive. Some of them just kind of come casually. Some come and want to learn, but they don't want to take examinations. And the third level, they want to come and take the Bhakti by Bhava certificate. So we got involved with Radhadesh. We got involved with the Ministry of Education. We were pushing, why isn't there systematic education in ISKCON? And that took us then naturally on up to the point where now we're on the executive committee for the Ministry of Education. which to my mind is struggling just about as much as any organization or any family in ISKCON. The Ministry of Education is struggling just about as much, you know. And I think if you ask the executive secretary, he's going to tell you also that the Ministry of Education is in diapers, you know. But it's hard, you know. Systematizing these things in the material world is not hard, because they do it for money. They read books for money, okay. Other people do it for nonprofit purposes. Then you got to do it for some higher ideals. You got to inspire people for Greenpeace, PETA, okay. But we're doing it for something even more difficult. We're doing it for religious purposes. So creating an educational institution in ISKCON is, you know, it's very difficult. We can take things from the Karmi educational world, you know, or the Jnani educational world, but it's difficult. It's a big job, you know. So then I came to the conclusion, looking around and around and around, systematic morning class, just do it. Association, system, morning class. And the third thing is actual content and data and logical structure, acquiring those. Learn how to associate with people who like to read Prabhupada's books. Learn how develop good systems and techniques that are good for you. For example, we do Chaitanya Charitamrita every day before Mangala Arati. We're online there, pretty much, you know. We do Nectar of Devotion right after every day. We read it in Spanish, like that. You know? Sangha, system, and then finally memorizing this, understanding that principle, you know, those kind of things. You know? So
which would be a natural outcome, I think, after Sangha and system. The other truths will come through. Yes.
If Radharani refuses to grow, Radharani refuses to know. Okay, so how much do you need to know? Acquiring too much knowledge from Prabhupada's books is achahara. You know, you're doing it for the wrong reason. It's niyamagraha. You can acquire knowledge read Prabhupada's books and acquire knowledge and acquire logic for the wrong reason, and it can be impediment to your advancement. You know, the gopis couldn't even read and write, Prabhupada said. You know? No. So then I want
to ask you your engagement with the academic world, and also the fact that many of your students then have now become scholars. They've engaged with the universities. They're teaching as professors or associate professors, etc. Was this a natural outcome, or did you design it this way? Were you really looking at cultivating young boys and girls, or young boys specifically, for them to enter academics, etc.?
It's just automatic, you know. One time the Gurukula in Peru was in complete chaos. It had been starting and going for many years, you know, and it was in one of those phases where it was collapsing again, Gurukula in Peru. And they asked one of my disciples, Madhu Manjari, Devi Dasi, to become the headmistress. And she asked me, and I said, well, okay, you've been a devotee for 7 years now. Okay, you should take charge of your own project. Do it. And they were going through the whole thing, and it was a mess, you know. And so then I came there, and it was the last time I really did something like full management program. And I saw how much I had learned about management just by being a manager in ISKCON. And we got the whole thing gone. Professional people, GBC secretary said it was one of the best organized programs he'd seen in ISKCON. You know, it lasted for 1 year in the local environment. 2 years, actually, 2 years in the local environment, because people didn't want it. They wanted something else. Okay. But then I suddenly realized that looking at all the people that are involved, that almost all of them were the educators involved were either my disciples or my aspirants. And that's when I realized that my nature was academic, and that I was, you know, naturally associating with academic people. But it's just one perspective. And again, you know. And specifically, Prabhupada promoted the Bhagavatam class, the morning and evening reading, and the 3 diplomas, the 4 diplomas, actually. So that's why I've been myself trying to work with these 4 diplomas, because there's something that Prabhupada spoke about, not a little bit. Atul Krishna actually extracted finally Prabhupada's letters and conversations on the diplomas, and it's something, of course, this is what we're doing now. We're trying to promote, systematic education, And I saw an entire curriculum from Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj based upon the books, reading them, for a university curriculum, for a bachelor's degree, which he wanted to introduce in Berkeley. I saw that. Prabhupada wrote back and said, very nice, very nice. And he made two comments about how it should be adjusted like that. So it was different than Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti by Baba, basically included those principles. So I personally saw that Prabhupada was quite acceptable for us to develop other curricula than Bhakti Shastri and Bhakti by Baba. You know, but those are ones that he liked those. You know, that analysis is there, and okay, and they can be a good perspective if we're trying to develop systematic reading.
Yes, Maharaj. Maharaj, we will request you to please share that that curriculum with us, that Maharaj, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj prepared. On the note of
I just saw it. I just saw it. I never have a copy. Maybe some of the disciples have it. Yeah.
We'll definitely ask around. Maharaj, on the topic of chaos, for those who were not reading regularly or taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books, what chaos did you witness in 40 years in the lives of those who were not taking shelter of the Shastras?
I have to comment that the topic of chaos is an oxymoron. Yeah. You cannot have the topic of chaos. It's kind of like it's like Mayavad philosophy or Buddhism. Yeah. Okay. People who don't read. I mean, how many? Of course, I don't know all the people that don't read Prabhupada's books and how it influences people. I have a suspicion, for example, in countries like I've seen this. Okay. In the Northeast, in Swarup Damodar Maharaj's area, in Arunachal Pradesh, what's it called? Nagaland, Manipur. They don't read much. They don't read much, but they chant a lot, and they listen to other people. They listen to other people preaching. I've seen that the Brahmanas are expected to talk all the time. I mean, when sit with the Manipuris sometimes, and they expect the Brahmanas to be preaching. They'll just be sitting around doing nothing. It's like off day. And they expect the Brahmanas to be sitting there talking, and then if one of them stops, they expect another one to start. They just expect that we can come in. It's like playing a tape, like playing a recording of Prabhupada. They expect that always these Brahmanas will be talking, preaching, reading. And so that's one culture. They don't read. They don't have to read. They're like the gopis. They're always listening. They're listening. They understand everything. So that's one important point. Books are for Brahmanas in many ways. And then the other people understand it through puppet shows, lectures, and that kind of thing. So the Brahmanas have to do that. They have to read, and they have to put those into other media, other language. I can put it into Carl Jung's language. Okay. The other side of the coin is that people who are more, sometimes people, karma yoga, you become attached to your mode of working, and so you just want to do physical work. I know people like this. They want to get right into their physical service, plumbing or computer programming or this kind of stuff. As soon as they get up in the morning, they'll miss Mangal Artik. They'll go right into their project, turn the computer on. They'll go right into the shop and start sawing on things like that and stuff, And they'll actually deprecate, put down reading and hearing and chanting and the basic program diet that Prabhupada's done. And other thing too, managers, they'll say, well, the first thing is Mandira Marjanado, keep the temple clean, decorate the deities, get the bills paid. And then the classes and this kind of stuff and hearing and chanting is frosting on the cake. Whereas another idea is a temple is a community based around, a temple is a community of hearing and chanting. That's another idea. And so that karma yoga sometimes comes in and people commit offenses against the books and hearing and chanting, and become angry, it's subtle. It's the karma yoga, is there. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be involved in ISKCON, So that's a danger, being talking about this. And as far as I understand, the first priority is hearing and chanting. Unless that's healthy, then the second level of management will start to become a matter of prestige, honor, these kind of subtle things, and the anger will come, and the offenses and people go away. And many people have gone away who are good managers and stuff, like that. Yeah.
Maharaj, what advice would you give to the managers on this topic? Because you've been a successful manager in ISKCON. You mentioned that a few times. You said you looked at various projects. On the perspective of managers, sometimes we are approached with this question, oh, we are too busy, you know, we don't have time for all of this. We're just too busy with our services. Any perspectives on that, Maharaj, and any advice you like to give to the managers?
Yeah. Managers, Kshatriya nature. This is management. We understand. We have the perfect social system. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Okay. So, if somebody has this passionate mode, myself, I am Shudra, Brahmana, Brahmana, Brahmana. Okay. I have almost no Kshatriya. I like management as a game. My psychological inventories in the university, my family heritage, everything else, I'm a pioneer. I like investigating management. I like, this kind of stuff. But as soon as I figure out how it can be done, I like to tell somebody else and then forget about it. I'm like Shonaka Rishi. I like to start things and then disconnect. So understanding, So my program is personally, and people like me, is pioneering. I like to pioneer, reading programs and how they can work. And people say, oh, that's really good, But then somebody else has to apply it. Okay, yeah. When Thermopylae, the 500 Spartans, that famous thing, the Persian Empire with 500,000 men was trying to invade Greece, and the Greeks were fighting amongst themselves. None of the temple presidents could agree upon who was going to be in charge, who was going to be GBC secretary for the zone. Okay. So the Spartan king took his personal bodyguard, which was only 500 men, and went out up to the pass of Thermopylae, a very narrow place. And they stopped. 500 people stopped the entire 500,000 man Persian army like that.
Wow.
For 5 days, 6 days, But in the end, one traitor betrayed them and showed the Persian army where there was a passway through the mountains where they could come behind them. And then they all died, So the Spartan king who died there sent a letter back to all the different independent temple presidents, what they call them, kings, saying, because it was a rule that an attack on one country was an attack on all. We had to combine. He said, we lie dead, defending the laws you made. Okay, so this is the central principle, that Brahmanas. This movement has to be led by Brahmanas. We're talking about organization. They have to inspire the Kshatriyas and the what do you call it, the Vaishyas. This is a lot of the Bhagavad, the clouds and the wind, to organize good programs of hearing and chanting. Puppet shows for most people, dramas, theater, interesting classes, logical analysis, understanding for the Brahmanas, So temple presidents and everything else, and managers have to realize that we have to have Brahmanas. That if we don't have Brahmanas, then we cannot do our job. We will become quick, carcasses for Maya. Three things go to a rapid destruction. Trees on the bank of a river. Yeah. A woman in the house of some man other than her husband. Yeah. And a king without counselors. So the managers and everybody else. I have this nature too. I know people like this. They love to organize programs. They love to they're happy when they see the Brahmanas get a chance to preach. They're happy when they see people learning, get a chance to study these things. So their satisfaction is in organizing the programs, organizing them. And without that, the Brahmanas cannot do anything systematic. So there has to be this cooperation between the managers, the Brahmanas, and the Kshatriyas. And of course, in ISKCON now, all of us have some Brahminical tendency. So I love PowerPoint. When I'm trying to think, I do a PowerPoint show. That's my Shudra nature. It's very difficult for me, easier for me to think if I make a PowerPoint show, Okay. And somebody else has Kshatriya nature. Yes. Somebody might be the executive secretary for some ministry, He loves to organize other people's hearing and chanting. What are you, Tapana Misra? Are you Kshatriya, Brahmana? Or are you Kshatriya, Shudra, Brahmana? Okay.
Still trying to figure out, Maharaj.
Oh, okay. Then you are Shudra or Avaduta, one of the two.
Possibly the former one, the Shudra. More likely.
Okay, 7 o'clock.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, before we close our discussion today, what parting message would you like to give to the devotees in ISKCON, new, old alike, in order to inspire them to read Prabhupada's books?
Okay, there's so many. Can I tell one story?
Yes, please.
Okay, there's apparently about a 1 second delay, because when I say something, it takes 1 second for you to answer. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is what I heard with was it Ayodhyapati Bhakti Bringa Maharaj. Maybe like about a story. Maybe maybe about 8 years ago or something. Maybe 10 years ago. He wanted to get his Indian visa, a visa for India renewed. And so anybody who's dealt with Indian bureaucracy knows that this is a process extending over hundreds and thousands of lifetimes to try to renew your visa in India. Maybe a little more than that, So anyway, he went from Vrindavan to Delhi. He found Delhi. He found Chanakapur and, where the offices were. He found the complex. He found the building. And finally, he found the office. In the office, he finally found the guy's desk where, foreigners were supposed to renew their visas, It was one of these older buildings that apparently was still surviving from the British Raja, their old building, with, 200-year-old documents piled up on the roof and on the walls and mice running across the floor and eight people sitting at their desks working. So he went up to the boy's desk, a young man, the guy was working. He looked up at Maharaj and he said, well, what is it? What do you want? What do you want? He said, I'm with ISKCON, I want to renew my visa and this and that. And the guy said, okay, sit down. He said, do you have a bank account? You need this form, you need that form. Have you done this? Have you stayed this long? Where's your stamp on the visa? You got to get this filled out. You got to do that. And after a while, Maharaj was realizing, my gosh, this is going to take, days to get all these things. And where do I go for this and that, So finally, the boy was looking at him. He said, look, I'll help you. So he locked his desk up. And he went out and took Maharaj here and there, and he took him up these back stairways. He said, watch out for this step. It's broken. You'll fall down. So he took him to this place, that place. And they made people stop their work and take Maharaj's work right away. Oh, Sanjeev, I can't do this now. I'm busy. Rajiv, you owe me. Oh, all right. Give it to me. Well, it's question. Okay, sign here. Okay. Yeah. What is your mother's maiden name? So he got the whole thing done in about 45 minutes. And would have probably taken 4 or 5 days, So then they sat back down. The boy was opened his desk, was putting the final stamps on it. And he said, this is a true story, as I've heard it, maybe just 10 years ago or something, 12 years ago. And the boy said, I'm helping you because, you're a part of ISKCON. You're one of, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's, devotees and stuff. And see, what happened was, he said, I was so miserable, so unhappy that 1 year ago, I got Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And he pulled it out of his desk drawer. And he said, I was reading it for 1 year, and I become so happy. Everything is so clear now, who I am and what is life. And so when I saw one of his, members of ISKCON coming like that, I thought, of course I have to help him like that and so on, Then he said, very sincerely, he said, do you think if I wrote to Srila Prabhupada, he would answer me? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, this is 10 years ago. And he said it was such like shyness and bashfulness at the same time, such, yearning. And then Maharaj said he realized he had to tell him that actually Prabhupada left his body in 1977. And it's like, somebody coming in, I can tell you, Tapana Misra, is your name Tapana Misra Das? And I say, yes. And he say, is your wife Indira Saki? You say, yes. Prabhu, there's been a very, very terrible auto accident. I have to tell you, your wife is dead. Even if you just hear it as a story, it touches you. What to speak? And the boy started crying. And everybody's looking over, and what happened? Something must have happened terrible. He's got bad news about his father. So he's there. Prabhupada is there in his books and stuff. And Prabhupada is a very, very interesting person. He's full of humor. He's full of mercy. He's full of just always new information like that. So come to the morning class, organize morning classes. If nobody else is there, find a teacher. find classmates. And I would say classmates are more important than teachers. You got a teacher. You got Prabhupada. You organize the classes. So I have to go now because in 24 minutes we're starting our class. And I have to be there. I'm the leader. I must get in front of them. I must get in front of them. I don't know where they're going or what they're going to study, but I am the leader. So that's how I organize. Many managers know this, right? Management means getting in front of the mass of people and pretending you know where they're taking you.
Maharaj,
Yes.
such a heart-touching story, but very inspirational on that note that we all should try to make sure that we stick to our morning program. We stick to an idea of collecting a sangha of classmates with whom we can study Srila Prabhupada's books every day and apply it in our life. On that very powerful and short but a very touching story, I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much for taking out the time to share with us the importance of reading Prabhupada's books and how it touched your personal life and how you've seen it touch the lives of many others. On behalf of the ministry, I'd like to offer my thank you to one of our executive committee members, His Holiness Hanumatpresaka.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're grateful to Srila Prabhupada, whose words have always kept us alive and shall keep us alive as long as we take shelter in them.
Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books.
Okay. Thank you very much for organizing these programs. So Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.